looked at the map and suddenly realized something about your own life. A few days ago I did. I wasn't planning to make this video. Actually, I was just thinking about my family, about where I came from. So I opened the map of Russia and started placing pins. One for my great-grandfather, another for my grandfather, my grandmothers, my parents, my sister, me. At first it didn't seem unusual, but then I zoomed out. And that's when I realized something. For almost 100 years, every generation of my family had started over somewhere new. Not in the next town, not in the next region, sometimes on the other side of the country, which can be further than traveling to another continent. A couple of weeks ago, it was my birthday. I turned 37. Maybe that's why I've been looking back, trying to understand how I ended up here. And the more I looked at this map, the more I realized this isn't just my family's story. It's also a story about what it means to live in the largest country on Earth. Before we start, there is one thing you should know. I actually don't know much about my family's history. Not because I never cared, but because for a long time, many families in Russia simply didn't keep detailed records of their past. Sometimes documents disappeared, sometimes people believed it was simply safer not to ask too many questions. So the earliest person I know something about is my great-grandfather. About 100 years ago, he lived in the city of Gorky. Today it's called Nizhny Novgorod. Life there became impossible. A terrible famine forced countless families to leave everything behind. Mine was one of them. After a long journey, they settled here, Sakhalin Island. If you're not familiar with Russian geography, this might not look particularly dramatic. So let me show you something. This journey was about 7,000 kilometers. That's around 4,350 miles. To put that into perspective, that's farther than the distance between London and New York. And my great-grandfather and his family never left Russia. Imagine leaving everything behind and moving even farther than from one continent to another. They moved not for adventure, not for work, simply to survive. Sakhalin became home. My grandmother grew up there. She got married there. My mother and my uncle were born there. For that branch of my family, everything began on this island. Or so it seemed. Because my grandfather, the man my grandmother married, had traveled an incredible distance to get there too. He was born here, in the city of Bisk, thousands of kilometers away. I don't know much about him. He died of cancer when I was still a child. But I do know one story. He grew up in an orphanage. And when he was 15 years old, he ran away. His destination? Sakhalin. This journey was about 4,800 kilometers, almost 3,000 miles. That's about the distance from Cairo, Egypt, to London, England. Except my grandfather never crossed a single international border. He was still in Russia. Unlike my great-grandfather, he wasn't running from hunger. He was running towards the possibility of a better life. And that's only one side of my family. Up until this point, these were two completely separate stories, two different families, moving for different reasons, making different choices, with no connection between them. But eventually, their paths crossed. My father's side of the family had their own journey. My grandmother grew up in Chita, in eastern Siberia. When she was a young woman, her family moved to Ukraine. At the time, it was all one country, the Soviet Union. They didn't cross an international border. They were simply looking for a better life. That's about the distance from New York to Lisbon. My grandmother got married there. Life, however, had other plans. Her marriage didn't last. When she was 7 months pregnant with my father, she returned to Chita alone. Sometimes going back home is also a new beginning. A few years later, another person entered the story. My grandfather. Well, not my biological grandfather, the man I call Grandpa. The one who raised my father. The one who I still think is the best grandfather in the world. He was born in Chelyabinsk. Like so many people in those years, he moved wherever work could be found. Eventually, that brought him to Chita. That's about the distance from Reykjavik to Rome. That's where he met my grandmother. And when my father was 3 or 4 years old, they got married. He legally adopted my father. He gave him his patronymic and his family name. And many years later, it became my family name until I got married. Sometimes family isn't only the people you are born to. Sometimes it's the people who choose you. A bit later, my aunt was born. And once again, my family packed their belongings because my grandfather was offered a job on Sakhalin Island. Now remember my mother's story. She grew up on the same island. She had no connection to my father's family, none at all. And yet, out of all the cities, out of all the towns, out of all the places in the largest country on earth, they both ended up on the same island. They went to the same school, they fell in love, and that's where my story begins. If just one of these journeys had never happened, I wouldn't exist. For a while, it seemed like my parents' story had found its happy ending. They got married on Sakhalin. My sister was born there. Life seemed stable, but it was only for a little while. Then something unexpected happened. My grandmother, on my father's side, managed to buy my parents a small house back in Chita. So my family packed everything once again and left Sakhalin. A few months later, I was born in Chita in 1989. But I don't remember that city at all. I wasn't even 1 year old when my family moved again. This time, back to Sakhalin. They were offered an apartment there. Compared to an old house in Chita, it was a much better place to raise a family. So, back across Russia we went. I don't remember that move either. But I do remember what came next. When I was 4 years old, I became seriously ill. I had a kidney problem. By that time, my older sister had already developed a chronic kidney condition too. And the doctors gave my parents one very clear piece of advice. Move somewhere warmer. Not next year, not someday, now. So once again, my family's map changed. That would be 125 hours by car, but luckily we went by plane. With a connection flight in Moscow, the journey only took us 20 hours. That decision changed our lives. My sister recovered, so did I. Astrakhan became the place where I discovered something about myself. I have a way with languages. I started in a very unusual kindergarten. It specialized in foreign languages. Because I couldn't pronounce the Russian sound R properly, I was placed in the French group.
И вот по нашим, вы поняли, что, наверное, таки свои обещания я исполнила. И мы с вами попали в город Париж. Ну, послушайте, по-моему, там кто-то разговаривает.
Mama Nicola, naprawdę? On Nicola wtedy tu chce. Admirable, będzie bardziej a nas tu? Je ne sais pas. Mais qui est? Qui êtes-vous?
Les enfants sont russes. Ils veulent regarder Paris. Vous les aider?
Avec plaisir.
Ну и вот, qui êtes-vous? Кто вы, ребята? Qui êtes-vous?
Je m'appelle Nicolas et c'est Annette.
Nicolas et Annette. Bien, Nicolas et Annette. Eh bien, Nicolas et Annette, vous nous aidez à regarder Paris. Bien, qu'est-ce que c'est? Où sommes-nous?
Maman, ce sont les Champs-Élysées. C'est la plage et la plus grande ville de Paris.
То есть, ребята, мы с вами попали сразу на Елисейские поля.
That's where everything began. Later, I started learning English, and I completely fell in love with it. Then another unexpected journey, but not mine, shaped my life. When my sister was 15, she won a place in the Future Leaders Exchange program. She spent an entire school year living with a host family in Pennsylvania. For my family, it was something extraordinary. It was the year 2001. Long before smartphones, before video calls, my parents didn't speak English, but someone had to call my sister's host family. Someone had to explain things. Someone had to translate. That someone was me. I was 11 years old, and suddenly I found myself speaking English on the phone with adults on the other side of the world. If you've ever spoken on the phone in a foreign language, you know it's much harder than speaking face to face. Looking back, I think that was the moment when I started believing that I could do anything. When my sister came back from the United States, my family moved again. This time to Moscow. That's 31 hours on the train. This time, the move would finally become my home. When I finished drawing all these journeys, I just sat there looking at the map. For the first time, I didn't see places. I saw people. Every line represented someone who made an impossible decision. Leave or stay. Start over or give up. None of them knew how their story would end. They only knew they had to keep moving forward. Throughout this video, you've probably noticed the words that appeared next to each journey. They weren't just reasons for moving. They were reasons for believing that life could become better. I used to think this was just my family history. Now I think it's something bigger. It's the story of ordinary but very strong people trying to build a better life one decision at a time. If my great-grandfather hadn't left because of famine, I wouldn't be here. If my grandfather hadn't run away from the orphanage, I wouldn't be here. If the doctors hadn't told my parents to move somewhere warmer, I might be a completely different person today. Every single journey mattered, even the ones that must have felt frightening or impossible at that time. Now that I am 37 years old, I'd look at my life and I understand that just like every generation of my family before me, I don't know what future looks like. Life has a way of reminding us that certainty is often an illusion. Sometimes plans change, sometimes circumstances change, sometimes the entire direction of your life changes because of a single decision. But looking at this map gives me an unexpected sense of peace, because every generation before mine also lived through uncertainty. They didn't know what would happen next either, and yet they kept going. They started over again and again, and somehow their stories led to mine. But there is one funny idea that doesn't leave me. If my family's story had happened almost anywhere else in the world, I would probably be an immigrant today, or the daughter of immigrants. My family's journey would have crossed country after country, language after language, border after border. But somehow, every one of these journeys happened inside a single country. I think this is one of the most striking things about Russia. It's not just that it's the largest country in the world, it's that a family can travel thousands upon thousands of kilometers across forests, mountains, islands, different climates, different cultures, and still be home. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next videos.